You finally start?
Oh, yeah, please do.
Okay. Very good afternoon. We're in for session 7. If everyone could just get seated for the afternoon. So session 7 is on care policies, child development, and well-being. We are 3 minutes behind schedule. But we won't take it from you, Otgontugs. She's going to present on the mapping of childcare in Mongolia, and then we will take the discussion after. So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to sit here or sit there. I think I prefer. Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting us here. And we are very happy to share with our research on childcare. We used the data recently, Mongolian Feminist in 2019. We're very happy to present our findings. Let me tell you that our first author, Boldbaatar, is here, and we will answer your questions after the presentation altogether. So we motivation for this research is that when we started to estimate unpaid care autonomy size in Mongolia, we usually relied on adults, mothers, grandmothers, fathers, grandparents, time unpaid for the unpaid care work. But we left behind the children. But we all know from all our experience that as a children, as a girls, we usually, the boys also, we usually also participated in the unpaid care work in our families and homes. So since the Feminist survey has diary reported by the children aged 12 to 17, we thought maybe that's a good source of the data to estimate how children are providing care, unpaid care in their families and other people's families like relatives, aunts, uncles. So we started this research. So we are going to first on one slide. I will talk about Mongolia. Maybe many people in this room, of course, know about Mongolia, but we will tell more about country, and also we will talk about recent research literature. What we do know about recent research literature, how much time, how much percent of the children who provide in unpaid care work in other countries, who documented that. We will talk about that. And because of time shortage, we will directly go to the findings. In our paper is online, uploaded online. You can see and read on the conference program. So on findings, we wanted to share on 4 findings, like how much do care children do provide in their families, first. Secondly, what types of care do children provide? Child care, elderly care, or care for disabled or for other family members. We want to show you. And also we wanted to tell about characteristics of the children who provide care. Are they boys mostly, or girls, or rural girls, or urban girls, or boys? And lastly, we estimated or less and tried to find out how the time spent on unpaid care is affecting, time spent on learning and education for these children. Okay, background. Mongolia, I was explaining about country, talking about country during our lunch and break and coffee break, and only 3.4 million people, huge land, this, and 1/3 of the population is still rural, herders, living outside of, middle of nowhere in the country, and 60% of urban households live in gear area. give the tent, and during even winter, they live in gear. And that gives us some idea how the country households in rural areas provide care for their children, disabled, and members of the family or elderly people. About the country, 1990s, before 1990s, country was a socialist country with one political party and with planned economy. So early 1990s, country with other countries from socialist bloc transitioned from the market-oriented economy to democratic country. During socialist time, before the 1990s, the country was having a policy of dual care model. Usually, state was very much involved in the children's care, in elderly care as well. A very interesting point is that during socialist time, mothers in Mongolia gave their children, 45 years old children, to nursery and went back to factories to work. That kind of policy we had. But since the 1990s, all care responsibilities now become the burden of the families. Oh, okay. So this is from research literature we learned, and I would like to know that from the audience that maybe you know more recent literature on child caregivers. It's mostly done in case of UK, US, Peru, Egypt, Thailand, and Thailand. We are contributing to the research literature by doing this research, and Mongolian Time Survey 2019 has up to 400 households sampled of, and about 13,400 household members information, and 6,290 people recorded diaries, including the children aged 12 to 17. And 8% of the respondents are children, and the children are providing childcare, elder care, disabled care. And also we use the regression analysis, about which I will show at the last slide. This is the first kind of finding, how much care do children provide. You see, here is the girls, urban girls, rural girls, and boys, urban boys and rural boys. Urban boys are very busy on the production of goods for their own final use, busy herders boys, but urban boys are not so much busy with this final production. But however, urban boys are providing twice much as care, unpaid care, compared to rural boys. About the girls, rural girls are also busy compared to urban girls with the herding and producing milk products and the milking cows. But at the same time, they're providing same amount of the unpaid care to their family members, 28 urban girls and 28 minutes for rural girls. What types of the care do children provide in Mongolia is about 41% of respondents say girls are showing that they're providing childcare. Boys are about 23% say they're providing childcare. Here, the adults, 45% of the adult women say they're providing childcare, unpaid childcare. Okay, what type, and here, what types of, we explained it, and for the time saving. What types of care do children provide is mostly passive care, passive child care. You see, you are children also, and also you're passively taking care of their siblings in other, relatives' children, like unpaid volunteer childcare and instruction, and playing with children, playing and making them do homework, but not going to that providing medical care. This is the responsibility maybe of mothers and grandparents. So here is the descriptive statistics of the children when we use this data for the oil regression. Here are the results of the oil regression. You can see that we estimated six types of regression, and we found that being girls means that they provide more unpaid childcare than being a boy, and children's time spent on other activities, when it increases that time on the caregiving decreases. So it's mostly true. And children in household with greater care demands more care time from the children, especially with dependency ratio in that family is high. The family of that, the children of that family spends more time on unpaid care. And we found from other research, from other research literature, different thing. In the case of Mongolia is when from the developing countries, children, families of vulnerable families usually do provide more unpaid care. But in the case of Mongolia, when your mother has higher education and your family has more higher income, the girls and boys of that family provide more unpaid care for that family members. Compared to US, UK research literature, maybe when your mother has or father has higher education and have more family income, then maybe the children of that family spends less time on unpaid care. Maybe that family in UK and US hire more domestic helper. That's why it can be explained. It was different in the case of Mongolia. And also unpaid care time in children's learning, how it's affected children's time for learning by time spending on unpaid care in their families is that it was very seasonally during summertime, their children's boys and girls unpaid care time increases, and being girl also girls spend more time compared to boys, and children's time spent on other activities. When it increases, their time on care decreases. We found no much significant difference between rural girls or urban girls. They similarly very much providing similar time of the unpaid care for we found. And on conclusion that we found that all children aged 12 to 17 years perform 35% of total unpaid care and 41% of total unpaid care work in their families in Mongolia. And much of the care that children provide is passive care, not active, but supervisory kind of care. But same time, they're very much also involved in direct care, feeding the babies, and changing their diapers and cleaning, instructing their homework. And by gender, there is gender difference between boys and girls, and girls spend 1.3 times more time on unpaid care work compared to boys. And there is no such a significant difference between rural girls and urban girls. But surprising yourself when we explain that urban children spend more time somehow than rural children on care, children's care. Maybe it can be explained by the heavy time demands for the rural boys and the rural girls. They tend to livestock. Our regression analysis showed that children's gender, number of siblings inheriting his families, and household income, education of the parents, and dependency ratio presence of disabled or elderly member in that household really is pretty much related, statistically significantly related to children's involvement in unpaid care. In our takeaway or contribution of our research, maybe we can say that main contribution to the research literature, that when we will estimate unpaid care economy size, maybe we need to also include children's time spending on unpaid care work, maybe from 12 to 17, in addition to the adults, women and men's unpaid time spent on care. Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask your discussant to come. I think that's Abou. He's going to have 10 minutes. Thanks, Abou.
Thank you very much. I wanted to congratulate the authors for this interesting paper. I apologize for having not a PowerPoint presentation. They use the time use survey in Mongolia, and one of the main results is that being a girl results in more time for caring than being a boy. And another result that I find normal is that as a child's time spent on other activities increase, time spent on caregiving decreases. I think that it is a result that is very, very, very normal. And higher household income is associated with a child's higher involvement in care. That is a result that demand further explanation from the authors, because I thought that if you are in a household with high income, you must not be in the household for taking care of children. That's what I saw, but you can explain in your context why we have this result. But my problem is that here, your research question is how children's time spent on child care affect their study time. That's the question you have, the study time. But you don't explain much more the educational system in Mongolia, because we need to know exactly what are the schooling rate and the school dropout. Since you are interested in trade-off between child care and learning, if you take people or children aged over 12, I think that maybe you miss something, because if we talk about the schooling for children, you should take into account those aged between 5 and 12. Yeah, but I know that in your survey you don't have children between 5 and 12, but you can use another or other data to give descriptive statistics on that. And apart from this, Your results show that for children aged between 12 and 17, an increase in child care of 10 minutes daily is associated with a decrease in time spent on learning of 3.6 minutes. But before the results, you showed that on average, these children spent 12 minutes daily on unpaid work. If on average they spend 12 minutes, and you find that an increase of 10 minutes leads to decrease of 3 minutes in learning, my question is, if it is not marginal, a decrease of 3 minutes in learning, what can be the effect on school performance or school attendance if you reduce the time for learning for just 3 or 4 minutes per day? You have to explain more to convince, because I am not sure that it is a result that can be used for decision. And to convince you, it's convince that it's not the case, it's not marginal. You have to show the effect of 1 minute spent on learning on these variables, school performance or school attendance. And to finish, I think that, as I said earlier, you can extend the analysis to children aged between 5 and 12 to have more impact on education, because if not, there is no longer a trade-off between childcare and learning. If you have a very high school dropout, there is no longer a trade-off, because children are obliged. They are not other thing to do. They are obliged to take care of siblings or parents. That a few comments I had on this paper that I found very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Otgontugs, Banzragch, I hope I said it right, from the National University of Mongolia, and Abou, Kane from University Cheikh of Dakar. We're now going to have the second paper from presenter Ebru Kongar, titled Centrality of Care Work in Feminist Economics, Scholarly Identity, from Dickinson College.
Hello everyone, it's wonderful to be here in Nthabiseng. Today I'm presenting Centrality of Care Work in Feminist Economics, Scholarly Identity. This is a paper Günseli and I have been working together, and I believe she is joining us online today. She's among the attendees. Many thanks to online attendees as well. So since the early 2000s, there has been a substantial body of scholarship in economics, looking at care work, both documenting its importance and also identifying policies to reduce women's disproportionate share of this type of work around the globe. And suggesting policies. The pandemic made visible economy's reliance on this type of work, the type of care work provided by parents, teachers, and nurses. And this visibility during the pandemic and during the subsequent recession was an opportunity, and a missed one at that, to implement policy changes such as investing in social infrastructure. Now, within this backdrop, it's important to note that the importance of care work has always been contested by feminist economists. The whole debate, for instance, centered on whether making visible or valuing unpaid care work is going to lead to women's liberation, with late Barbara Bergman, for instance, arguing that it would not. And in the 2022 IFE conference, there was some resurfacing of this debate. Should we be, as feminist economists, studying care work, or should we be studying labor markets, so on and so forth? So with this paper, we aim to bring new insights on the question of centrality of care work in feminist economics. We examine this question through the perceptions of feminist economists. We conducted a survey. We targeted all authors of feminist economics and review of economics of the household over the 2003 and 2022 period, and two special issues by Oxford Review of Economic Policy and the Economic Journal. We sent the survey out to 1,858 authors, 1,581 of them received it, and we have a response rate of 28%, which is similar to other studies, other surveys of economists. So in the survey, we have this question that asks, what are the distinguishing features of your research that make you feminist? And of course, this question did not go to people without a feminist identity. So how did we identify people who identify their research as feminist? These are either economists who use feminist economics as an approach or the approach to their research, or economists who do not, but they identify their research as feminist, and scholars from other disciplines with a feminist identity. They argue that the research they are doing is feminist. In our total sample, 65% of the respondents said they are feminists. So 285 of survey respondents received this question, the one at the top. We ended up with 269 usable responses, which is about 94% of those who received this question. Throughout the paper, we refer to this group as the feminist sample. So the first thing we looked at is how our feminist sample is different than the total sample. In the feminist sample, perhaps not surprisingly, there are more authors who published in feminist economics rather than REHO, Review of Economics of the Household. In the total sample, 61% of authors are FE authors. In the feminist sample, about 80% of them are. When we asked this question, most respondents gave thorough and thoughtful answers, and we quoted them all. But since the focus of this study is care work, we are trying to identify if care work is a distinguishing feature of the research that makes it feminist. We are looking at codes of social reproduction, unpaid work, time use, work-life balance. We aggregated them under the care work code. And this is 1/5 of our feminist sample. So 20% of the feminists in our sample identified care work as the or one of the distinguishing features of their research that makes it feminist. So we collected demographic information through the survey. So we have gender identity, we have origin and residence, where they are. We have the age of the respondents, so on and so forth. One thing I'd like to share here is, as we move from the total sample to the feminist sample to the care work sample, the share of women increases. And I think there's something to be said here about that our lived experiences as people inform what we pursue in our research, because that's what we perceive to be important part of our economic lived experiences. In this huge table, I won't go over it all, we also collected information on people's approach to economics. And if we identified people as mainstream, if they were behavioral or neoclassical economists, everyone else is heterodox, unless they told us they are using at least one mainstream and at least one heterodox approach together. So one thing we see here when we look at care work scholars to the feminist sample, one thing we see is that heterodox feminist economists are overrepresented among people who think care work is a distinguishing feature of their research that makes it feminist, even compared to the feminist sample. Mainstream feminist economists are less likely to be in the care work sample. And when we ask people who are mainstream economists, do not approach their research from a feminist economics perspective, yet identify their research as feminist, there are zero in our sample of people who think care work is what makes their research feminist. Again, compared to the care work sample, compared to the feminist sample, when we look at the care work sample, the share of feminist economics author rises yet again. So in the feminist sample, there's about 79% of FE authors. In the care work sample, this goes up to 98%. So the rest is qualitative analysis, us analyzing what the respondents are saying about care work. And we identified two themes. One group is saying care work is central to their research. That's what they study. And the other group is saying, I study other economic questions, but I do not ignore unpaid work in my research. I'm going to present some representative quotes for the first group on centrality of care work in analysis. They are saying social reproduction is central. My research makes unpaid care work central to the analysis. My research starts from the proposition that the provision of care is the most important economic decision. The other group says things like, I'm always taking into account the sexual division of labor and unpaid care work in the study of the labor market. When they look at labor markets, again, they do not ignore the gender division of unpaid work. I pay attention to the interplay of the care and cash economies in my research, is another representative quote. We then looked at what else do these care work scholars say about their research that makes it feminist, and identifies three other themes. How they incorporate gender into their analysis is one theme. Ethical judgments is the second theme. And paying attention to agency and power relations in research is the last one. So in terms of incorporation of gender into analysis, the representative quotes are at the top, and they read, recognition of gender norms and intra-household dynamics as critical factors that determine economic decisions and outcomes, and gender lands on every issue. So we interpreted these statements as they are bringing a gender lens, viewing the economy as a gendered structure, rather than putting a dummy variable into the equation. These scholars also acknowledge their ethical stance on issues. So they make it very explicit that they are feminists trying to improve the lives of women, girls, men, boys, and non-binary individuals, and everyone. So the focus is on the lived full experience, valuing care and non-market reproductive work, valuing fundamental human capabilities. defining efficiency as the most efficacious way of achieving thriving individuals and communities. In my research, the necessary transformation of public policy with a gender approach is highlighted. The criticism of the austerity policies implemented by the central bank and the stabilization programs of the IMF have impoverished the population and harmed the capacities of women. So they make it very explicit that the goal here is a feminist one of improving lives. They also pay attention to power relations within the society, recognition of gender power relations embedded in markets and institutions based on an understanding of patriarchy as a system of production and reproduction that coexists with capitalism. In other words, these are scholars who are looking at the structural causes of these inequalities rather than coming up with frameworks that justify these inequalities. So to sum up, 1/5 of the feminist scholars in our sample consider care work as an important feature of feminist economics. They are more likely to be women and heterodox feminist economists compared to all scholars with a feminist identity. Care work feature is strongly associated with 3 other characteristics of research of these scholars. The economy is a gendered structure where gender identity intersects with other identities to shape constraints and opportunities. Power relations permeate the economy, and the goal is to dismantle inequalities. Thank you.
Is Mary here? Is she online? Mary, oh, I thought that Ashima was gonna say, Mary's not here. Mary Borman for Discussants from the Center of Global Development.
Thank you so much. I wanted to start out today and say how fitting it is that I get to talk about a paper on feminist economic scholarly identity, given that I'm so glad Günseli is joining online. I got the opportunity to take my first class in feminist economics, actually from Nilüfer Çağatay, but before that, Günseli had taught my gender studies classes. So the combination of this being dedicated to Nilüfer and having Günseli's paper is just wonderful. And really, I want to say how fascinating I found this paper and how much it's actually already motivated conversations with colleagues about care work. And so I wanted to take a step back and think about some of the central questions from the framing. In the first, and I'll get to the arguments in a minute because I think you started to get to these group but didn't fully develop them, has care work decreased in importance over time for gender equality and also to the political project of feminist economics? And then secondly, does a focus on unpaid care work risk being co-opted by alternative agendas or diverting energies needed for more impactful areas of research and policy engagement? And then really the focus of what you did within your survey, how can determining what defines scholarly identity for authors of the different journals help us understand the importance of care in current research agendas? So even though I've studied feminist economics for such a long time, I actually was not familiar with this historical debate. And so I wanted to pull out some of the pieces of it that I thought were very interesting. As you cited and quoted some things from Bergman, one, that this was focused particularly on unpaid care work, right? It was wasteful of feminist energies and potentially harmful to the political project of achieving gender equality. And instead that we should really think about encouraging women's paid work, reducing their dependence on men, which I think ties into Haroon's presentation earlier. But then this also is about removing obstacles to women's entry into the paid labor force, which does then tie to care, and designing policies to address gender equalities in the labor market. And as you mentioned, there's kind of this fear about the statistical visibility contributing to glorifying the housewife, right, in this case. And then the current debate, so that was 1999 and 2022, and decided this roundtable that I was not at, even though I was at the Geneva conference. And the framework is overextended, and that from Decide, that feminists focus on unpaid care work again can contribute to glorifying the housewife. But also I thought the really interesting argument about the decreased importance over time due to this demographic dividend. So that's related to a decline in fertility, improvement in basic infrastructure, which I'm guessing is more about like electricity, wash, these types of things than social infrastructure. And then the declining incidence of multi-generational households that has entailed elder care responsibilities. So really framing elder care as being a financial burden rather than this kind of like time and care component. And instead, again, the focus on training women for well-paying jobs, opening access to jobs is really the important place to focus. So in terms of findings and contribution, I think this framing around individual scholarly identity, where you found that 22% of the feminist sample identified a term associated with care work, was incredibly interesting. What I found myself wondering was, what would the results be if you framed it instead around the field, rather than like the individual kind of scholarly identity and contribution, such as what makes economics feminist, or what are the most important issues for gender equality currently? But I think what you do here really further develops what I see as a very big ongoing conversation within the International Association for Feminist Economics and kind of feminist economics more broadly, is what differentiates gender and economics work versus feminist economics, and particularly heterodox feminist economics, which you found doesn't just include the focus on care work, as you said, but also the explicit goal of improving well-being and empowerment of marginalized groups, and the attention to power relationships and structures that reproduce inequalities. So as I thought of this, I wanted to come back to some of these like initial framing questions and think about potential extensions. So, because what you find really gets to a lot of this aspect of the initial framing, but there's still some other pieces that I think you could either develop in this paper or in future papers. So I put those other two questions back up there. And I thought a possibility could be conducting a survey of IACU members on what do you think the most important issues are for gender equality, to see how much care comes up. Has it decreased over time, and getting a sense again of the field rather than individuals? What do people identify as the biggest risks for research being co-opted by anti-feminist movements? What issues define feminist economics as a field? And then I thought you could also potentially supplement the survey research with quantitative analysis, looking at this demographic dividend, and also qualitative research. I don't know how much we really know on what research has been co-opted by these anti-feminist movements, but it would be really, really interesting and compelling, I think, to see, has this been used this way? Has the work about valuing unpaid care work actually been used by these movements to glorify housewives? I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I'd be very curious to know. And I have my own kind of thoughts about all of this that I'll save for my comments on the policy roundtable tomorrow. Especially as someone who doesn't have children, but you know, has parents that are in elder care. So I think, again, your findings are really interesting and important, and I think you really did a great job of pulling out those pieces there, right? And some of my questions about the field in some way are answered by what you found in terms of 98% of the authors from feminist economics, right? Like kind of answering that question. But I still think this links to some larger debates and questions, and I'm sure other people in the audience probably have others to add. But fundamentally, I think it's part of this question of what defines the political project of feminist economics. And that's a big question, but you know, where are we in that process right now? I think it's the pandemic was obviously a defining moment, but since then, you know, have we made this progress that has made care relevant? Again, I have feelings about it, but I'll share those tomorrow. I also think it ties to a question that's, do we think that paid work for women is inherently emancipatory and empowering? And are there different theoretical and policy implications from a framing or a focus on social reproduction? Because I know Nancy is a social production sometimes, which, you know, talking with my colleague Catherine Moose, I think we were thinking about, you know, if you're critiquing capitalism, right, and thinking about work in that way, that gives you some different framing, right, around how we're approaching that from policy, I think, as well, versus the care economy, right? Because a lot of this is a critique of focusing on unpaid care work and even Blair and I were discussing how if you're thinking about the long run goal of comprehensive care systems, how that can create different policy implications in the short run in terms of projects versus this unpaid care work for me. So just some big picture things. And ultimately, I think it does have implications in terms of power, intersectional inequalities, right? What are we talking about in terms of class, in terms of race, in terms of the implications for the conditions of paid care workers? Another question I thought about are there tensions within areas of feminist research agendas which waste energies or are counterproductive? Or are we wasting energies by not identifying the ways they are complementary? And I would tend to lean towards the latter. I think there's ways which we weave these together and find increasing ways to make them complementary and tie very much to this workshop, to the macro, right? The micro and macro linkages. And this connects to the first session of the conference, which is how far have the priorities of feminist economics progressed within the heterodox economics field? Because you have some really compelling results about feminist heterodox economics. And I think Mark's model and some of the comments he received and thinking about how to take forward, that model within even the heterodox macro field, right, tells us that we probably have a long way to go in terms of communicating with them that audience. So I will leave it there, but hopefully that gives some food for thought in terms of the discussion and some interesting directions to take forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much to both Ebru and Mary. The last paper before we have everyone come forward, Emel Memis will do elderly care, non-caring economy. Thank you.
Thank you. What I'm going to share is that, first of all, I have to apologize for my discussant sending this past draft paper very late. Recently, we have started working on elderly care with my co-author, Ozge, Izdes, who is also a former student of Nilüfer, and probably she's online. Ozge helped me whenever I stuck. So this is kind of inquiry together, working on, we have been thinking a lot about childcare and, have done a lot of things already by IPEC and many other colleagues. And now it was kind of, maybe it's the life cycle, the period that we are passing through. It's like the time to think about the elderly care. Especially if we have a survey like time use survey, what can we take out from such a rich data set? So we started working on elderly care, but it's like in the literature it's been called informal. There is a lot of discussion about that too. If it is done out of market, within the households, or if it is done if the care is transferred between households, inter-household transfer. So care is also including the definition of informal elderly care. I mean, it's done for elderly. So going back, sorry, I started from the third slide. So the aging population in Turkey recently has been facing with this issue. There's a standard definition for that. If it is higher than 10% of the population is higher than 65, then the country is, the population is defined as the aging population. In Turkey, what we also observe is recently there has been a fast growing population group, what we call elder population in the past 5 years. Now it has reached to 8 million, over 8 million out of 84 million, and with Syrian refugees it's higher, of course. But we also have a growing share of middle-aged people, especially given the low fertility rates. The number of siblings have been limited, and the care providers are also getting, pregnancy age is also increasing. So, this is also this was a very interesting concept in the literature, which is called sandwich generation, which have been discussed in the developed countries for many years probably, but for Turkey it was new for us. All these care regimes discussion and welfare state discussion actually looks at differences among countries in terms of how they, how their policymaking status looks like, and compare, compile countries among different categories. When we look at that literature, we can only, categorize Turkey as a familiaristic state, of course. Family is the main provider, both for elderly care, but also childcare, as you know from the previous studies. This is also recently, added on this discourse about, how policymakers, the politics and ideology has been strengthened by the strong family discourse all over the world. And informal care, of course, for the public finance, it is very cost-saving strategy, and if it is done if it is left just into the households, then the cost of it, unequal distribution within the households is not unseen. So given the slow growth rates and shrinking tax base in countries, informal care has been increasing in countries like Turkey. So the literature has been very extensive, especially in political science. By political scientists in Turkey, they have been discussing about care regimes, welfare state, provision of formal elderly care has been nearly absent, and they have been identifying and defining, with new concepts, what are the issues in Turkey. And the government is also, have been forced to introduce care policies because it's also, growth and all these issues. They stuck into the this care deficit and growing care needs, including elderly care. In the literature, there has been an ample research on the caregivers side, mostly on labor market outcomes, labor force participation rates, who are the caregivers, what about their employment hours, employment conditions, and wages, and these studies, most of you are probably aware, especially focusing on the UK and US and developed world. But less has been said on the care recipients side, and there have been, also from the health economists, we have been reading a lot about political and psychological and health-related costs, but again, that's on the care recipients side. So, and also the aging population as a concept by political scientists have been discussed as a, politically, how can I say, structured concept, right? Suddenly people get old, and then they can be isolated from class, ethnicity, all sorts of social hierarchies, and they're all homogeneous group needing elderly care, right? Suddenly, and they're just one group. So feminist economists, on the other hand, have been discussing about care regimes, differences in care regimes, and redefining, aging and criticizing this kind of conventional literature. So what we did is, looking at this shows the recent situation in Turkey, 2023 data. What we observe also when people get older, especially in countries like non-caring states like Turkey, they also face higher poverty rates, and the prevalence to falling down into poverty gets higher. And there are some statistics surveys on elderly population. And when we compare to the general, overall population, we see that labor force status, of course, much lower among elderly population. But it also, despite unemployment rates are like higher, around 3% among male and 1.5% among female elderly, we still see that they enter into the labor market, and in the job market, what they do is usually agriculture sector's share is the highest among male and female elderly. This shows, in a sense, recently we have been also discussing about, trying to learn about how socioeconomic status or poverty status affects being caregiver, or as a care recipient, how they experience, how they survive, in a sense, fight with poverty. So this is the European Eurostat kind of multidimensional poverty rate. And when we look at that, we see that under 0 to 17 years, 1864, and over 65 years old, by sex, the rate of population at risk of poverty has been rising, especially for women. Just after 2020 COVID period time, it was declining before because of all these, pension scheme policies and recent crises have been just made it, how can I say, impossible to cover for the state, and given the inflation, macro policies in order to fight with high inflation rates, interest rates has jumped like 5 times in 3 years, from 10% to 50%, and given that, all that, what is it called? I totally forgot. Alım gücü, purchasing power of elderly population who are getting pension income have been also, shrunk. So here you can see that public elderly care provision by public institutions is almost absent. Among 8 million elderly, only 27,000 elderly are receiving. They are the care recipients staying at either private nursing homes or nursing homes affiliated with the Ministry of Social Policy, or nursing homes belong to the other public institutions. Some of the ministries have, but they just are municipalities, but they're also getting fewer. Now, going back to the time use data, Turkey, the single one and the most recent one is compiled in 2004-2015. So it's 10 years back. It has an elderly roster, separate one, but they are supposed to, submit. They are doing since last year. They started doing it, and this August it's supposed to be completed, and hopefully soon we will have a new one. It's a time diary, full-time diary, and it has an elderly care module which offers information on the age, sex, whether they are recipient, elderly care, or whether they live in the same household, what is the kinship or not. And what we did is, the starting point was, because it has been 10 years, when we think about sharing our results with policymakers, we will probably get a lot of criticisms, and we try to make it more recent. This was an idea that just came across with a great paper which has been done with ATUS. What they did is, by 5 years, it's like the Who's Caring Home, the title of the paper, probably you are aware also. So both for elderly who are living in or living outside, you can calculate intra and inter transfers of care. But what we did here is just for elderly care. They did for also childcare, so they can calculate all the transfers, including elderly care and childcare, and within the household and also across households. So from the elderly roster, this is like accounting. We just grouped by ages, by sex, elderly care recipient, and also caregivers, whether they're in the same home or not. What you see here, for each cell, according to the age group, on the right-hand side, the last right column, will show you which age group among women is spending how much, it's not spending, it's producing how much of the total care given to the elderly recipient who are women. So by this way, what we did is we also calculated frequencies, also average time spent on elderly care. What we did get is actually, in the previous study, we were trying to identify who are from which generation, and now we could be able to see that our age groups when we identify sandwich generations, are really, producing the majority or a larger share of elderly care. So the colors, when they get, darker, the share of the care produced and provided to the men or women is higher. At the bottom, when you see here, look at here, you will see again 4 women who are living in the same household, who are getting elderly care, who are elderly care recipients, are provided at 69% from women. I mean, women provide 69% of the elderly care provided to the women who are living in the same household, and 31% by men. So on this column, you see the caregivers sex and care recipients by sex there. And this is also living outside home, intra-household care transfers for elderly care. It showed a different picture. 47% of it is provided by women this time, when they are living outside. But when it comes to men, by the way, it's the majority of, still majority of the elderly care provided is done by women, 60%. Then what we did is using the other, population statistics, and tried to use the per capita from here. What you can calculate is per capita elderly care needs for each group, for each age group, by sex. So it helps. I mean, different than child care needs. This is kind of, a more actual care need identification method for elderly care. So per capita needs for each age group by sex you can calculate, and then you can just project, not forecast, but project it. If nothing happens over time, like if public provision in terms of elderly care, there has been no progress since 2015. I mean, so the per capita can be projected until 2023. So from there, what we try to do is when we estimate all elderly care needs in terms of hours, annual hours, you can divide it by 52 full-time workers by 40 hours a week, and then you can get how much full-time equivalent, care needs for elderly men, and then for elderly women. Sorry, no time. So this is like the cumulative, by the way. Wrongly, I put, for each age group different colors, but it's like for elderly men, you need 100,000, which is meaningful with your paper. In fact, I checked, whether I'm doing something very weird. And this is the 70,000 for elderly women. But again, this has very strict assumption, of course, like, keeping all the per capita needs for elderly care spent in 2050. And then rest is about poverty, how that is linked with caregivers. There was an endogenous labor supply estimation, and how that is linked with, how that shows the just association, not causality. When the public provisioning is absent, how much that cost fall on sandwich, in case of sandwich generation, how that impact on labor force participation, and then if they participate in the market, how much that will affect on employment hours. But this is in the folder, and this is just, draft of draft, and we have many questions to share with you.
Thank you so much for that. We still have Anna Maria, who's going to come in and do. Is she here?
Yes.
Yes, she'll do the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you very much for inviting me to discuss this paper. I think that this topic is fascinating. There's so few papers about this that I think that even a start, I know that this is a first draft, but even a start and find some interesting data about this is something new that can get to a lot of things. So in a nutshell, you are finding what we have been finding in several countries, that elderly population is rapidly growing, with care responsibilities failing largely on women, that there's a lack of adequate care, that most of the care is on the family, and this forces women into unpaid caregiving roles and limiting workforce participation. So this is going to increase the inequality. You were talking also about this sandwich generation, that I feel that is also a very interesting topic, that they have little kids, but at the same time they have elders, and there's a lot of burden there and poverty of time for them. And at the end, the paper calls for a policy reform, but also I want to encourage you to be more, advocate a little bit more about the policy reform and give exact recommendations for this problem. About the data looks amazing. It seems that you have a model for elders. That is something kind of new in the Tamil survey that is not usual in most of the countries. It will be great to see what you have there, and maybe with the descriptors you can portray all the important things that you can get from here. One of the things I was thinking that we maybe needs another space to brainstorm about that is, what is elder? Who is an elder?
Yeah.
You are defining this at the age of 55. I don't know exactly why, because then I was looking at the pension in Turkey, and the pension for women is 58 and for men 60. So maybe that could be it's very young, but that could be something that gives you a number. 65, I don't know why. Also, the other thing is at 55, at 65, when I look at data for Colombia, at 65, most of the people are caregivers rather than care recipients. So it's very difficult to compare this group with an older group or people with disabilities within the elders. So I don't know, because they can be a source of care. So it's going to reduce the burden, and if they have some disability, that is going to give you a burden of care. So I don't know how you can try to find out what is happening and who in reality is a dependent and who is not. And the other thing that here was important, I think, is about the pensions also. It would be nice to see how is the pension system in Turkey, because if you have a person who is getting a pension, that is going to change your decisions about participate or not in the labor market. One of the questions I had was about informal care, and you were talking about that. I was thinking that what is informal care? And also, when you talk about care in here, for me, it was not clear what is care, elder care here. Is that someone is living with you and is more than 65, or is you can identify that the woman, the adult woman there is spending a lot of time in this person, how many hours, it would be nice to see what is also the definition of elder care. And And well, I already said this. The other thing that was interesting in one of your tables is that when you see the hours that people give to care, in that one you can see that women from 30 and 40s, they are giving around 5 hours, while the women 65 and more are giving around 4 hours. So it's not that different. Okay. The other thing that it was for me difficult to it was to interpret the tables. You weren't like explaining very well the tables and the graphics, because it was not completely clear why the tables were not adding 100%. But then I can see that if you go to the next table, there you're going to have 100. And also when you have this graph showing how much money represent the care for elders. Also, that I was thinking about the Colombian case, where you can see in the Camus survey that families often receive the elder woman, but not the elder men. They have to be by themselves, and men in poverty, most of them have to see how they can deal with poverty. And we went in Colombia and have some interviews with elders, and some of the men were saying that the thing with them is that they had several families and they were violent when they were younger. So no one really thinks that they need to care for them. But for mothers, it's different. And when you see the use of time for mothers in Colombia, for elders in Colombia, women, you can see that the family receive them in the house, but they don't have any power in deciding, and they spend a lot of hours doing care. Like it's almost a slavery. So I think that you have plenty of data that you can start to understand how the families behave, who is giving care, and there's a lot of richness in there that is not yet exploited. About the model, you didn't explain the model, but the model is interesting, but is super big. You have a lot of variables, and there's a lot of culinarity. So one of my recommendations in the model is to have something simple and just look at the correlations that could like guide the discussion, and then have this big model. But maybe because of all the culinarity, you are not getting exactly what you want to see there. And also to distinguish between a woman in her 65 or 60, even 80, that they are caregivers instead of caretakers. Like try to differentiate that. And also in the regression, it was just for women, the sandwich women. I was also wondering why you are not looking at the same for men to see what is happening there. And this sandwich woman, I was wondering if it's more a problem of very high income countries, because the women are really getting the kids at very plus or 40, and it's at the same time that the parents are getting older. But I don't know if in other cases that is the same thing that happens. For example, in Colombia, still the prime age for having kids is 20 something. So it's not going to be, you are not going to have this problem, but it will be important to see those statistics for Turkey. And about policy recommendations, I think that you can like have a lot of information here and try to land it into policy recommendations here. One of them is to see what happened with the people that are 48 and older, and just like having that very young age for pension is like, I don't know, I think that you can say something about that. And Oh, that's it.
Thank you. Can I ask that all the presenters come and sit here so that we can have the question and answer? Okay, I've got 3 hands so far. Claudia at the back, and then okay, the discussants already, Ajit, and then I'll come there. So we've got the first 4 hands.
Can I ask my call first?
And I know that there's people online. Oh, she's inside, she's here. Just grab an extra chair. Do we have enough chairs? Just grab an extra one. Yeah, please. Thank you. So let's go with the first question. And then, okay, let's wait for everyone to sit down. We've got 15 minutes. I think we'll have enough time. So let's take Claudia first and then we'll go to the back. Then we'll go to Ajit.
Thank you. More than a question is a comment or Otgontugs. I don't know if you pronounce well your name. Okay. I recommend if you can distinguish the care or the care of honor activities in the direct care and indirect care is a good practice because you have different results. You can use the all activities care, yes, and then you can separate in the indirect care and direct care. I have 2 papers with this different with these different types of care, and I have different results. This can help improve your paper. Maybe try. Tell me how do you have?
Thank you. It was at the back, yeah.
Yeah, I just had 2 questions. But for the first paper, I know that part of the discussed point was that income increases, what was the probability of children doing the care would go up. And I don't know if you frame it like this, but to me it does make sense because income is not necessarily linear in the relationship, right? So if I have no income, I stay home, and the children are not in need to take care of their siblings, right? Something like that. But if my income increases, then probably I have to go to work, right? And the children have the siblings have to take care of each other, right? Now, if I had even more income, then maybe the siblings don't have to take care of each other, right? So that relationship seems non-linear to me, and it does make sense. I don't know if you bring up that. For the third paper, I just had a question also regarding the retirement systems. I know that pension was asked by the discussion, but I was also wondering about, I don't know how Turkey's social security system works. You know, in the US, they say if social security suddenly disappeared, we would all have to take care of our grandparents. So I was wondering, how is that, if there's such a risk sharing framework in Turkey, if that's what's going on, or if it can be improved, but it's different than having your own retirement account, right? It's pooling risk. So I was wondering if that also is, as I mentioned, it has been explored in the paper. And yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Ajit was next.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. First, a comment on the paper by Myagmarsuren, the paper on Mongolia. I saw that in one of the regression models that you had in the education time regression, the herder coefficient was insignificant. So I'm just wondering whether you had any thoughts on that, given the very big size of the population there. The other point is related to the point that Gunnar made, that I don't remember whether maybe I missed it, whether you had like parental employment status, especially for mothers, employment status, or their hours of employment as one of the explanatory variables in your regression. maybe a good idea to include it if you don't have it. Again, it's partly related to the point that you're making. And the other was that, there may be some problem of simultaneity bias, because you're running on the left-hand side, you have time that kids spend on caring, and on the right-hand side, you have a bunch of other time use activities. So, there may be a simultaneity bias there, and you should probably try to check for that. For Emel's paper, the retirement, and it's very fascinating that you have this data which is allowing you to map some of these things out. But one of it is related to the comment that observation that I had is related to the comment that you made. Is there a way in the data file to identify needy or dependent? Oh, okay. Is that based on DAS, on the daily activities of living? Whether you need help with, like, for example, sending a bill or going to the bathroom or something like that. Because that's the way it's done in the Health and Retirement Survey in the United States, which provides information on care received from elderly people from outside the household. So that would be a good thing to differentiate elders into the dependent and the non-dependent, and that'll have some impact on your estimations too. The other thing is that I have to say that using the proportion of people, the elderly population in the nursing homes, as a proportion of the what is public provision is perhaps a poor proxy, because people move to nursing homes at a very desperate situation. So that probably share is quite low here too, in the US too. Finally, the question about elderly well-being and time demands required for elderly care, I would argue is also a macroeconomic question. It's a question about how much social security and old age benefits, including medical care, publicly provided medical care. These become then very powerful levers, and incentives will emerge in a mixed economy like that of Turkey. There is strong public funding for it and public provisioning for it. There will be providers and there will be demand for workers to provide that kind of thing. So that can have a snowballing effect, similar to the investing in care scenarios that which we have studied together.
I'm going to stop my shit before it becomes a discussant. There were two more hands, Timin, and there are a lot of hands. Okay, let me take 2 rounds, and then there's a hand at the front. Can I take those 2? We take the first round, and if we have time, Timin, it's you, and then it's at the front. I know there's a lot more questions, so the quicker we get to them, can you just give her the mic? Yeah.
Thank you. My first question is for the it's about the case of Mongolia, because you mentioned when the household have higher income, they may outsource that kind of care services. Is there any kind of variable in your data set that you can capture that? For example, look at the household roster. Sometimes they have the caregivers, the maid working in the house in the roster of the household too. I'm not sure whether you have that in the case of Mongolia. And the second one, as Ajit mentioned about the regression of the learning time, right? So it kind of surprised that I see that the female variable have quite a positive and significant coefficient, something like a 71. It's like the girl spend about 1 more hour than the boys in learning time. So yeah, it's kind of the surprising result, but I'm wondering whether it's the social norms in that, encouraging the girl to study than boy in Mongolia or not. Yeah, that's his 2 questions. And
No. I wanted to ask one. I take the last question.
One.
Yeah, and then I want questions for Ebru's paper as well.
Yes.
If people have, okay, I'll take some of those as well.
So I have 1 question for Ebru and 1 for Emel. A fascinating paper and so much to make us reflect. But I was kind of concerned about being a care scholar, and I was thinking, did I answer this? Is that the only thing that defines us as good feminist economists? I'm not that sure. But also, and that might be a sample issue, there is lots of orthodox thinking and an emphasis on unpaid care work as a limitation for women to enter and the labor force. So it's not, we heteros and orthodox feminist economists arrive to the issue from different quarters. So I was wondering, is the sample issue? Is it the issue that you didn't get to the gender people in the World Bank, IMF, or so because they would say perhaps that this is important, but they approach it from a different angle. So more to think about, I think. And Emel, just I also was as Ana Maria was uncomfortable with the informal because even though these definitions are changing, I tend to think informality is an issue associated to the labor market. So if you want to say in-house, intra-household care, just let's call it like that, and I would lead to less confusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. I think there was a hand at the back for Emre.
Yeah.
Please. The discussant wanted to come back and discuss.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Just a quick question for Ebru. I wondered if anyone in your sample had published in both Reho and Levy, and if there's anything particularly unique about those folks. And even if there's no one who answered the survey, right, in your kind of data, people you emailed, I don't know, I just think that's kind of an interesting group of people. Thanks.
Can I take one last hand on the left? And then we take the responses from each of the panelists. Yes.
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 A comment and a question on Ebru and Günseli's paper, very interesting. Thank you for undertaking this research. I was wondering about whether the wording of the question on care, whether it's a defining aspect of what we do as feminist scholars. I haven't had the time to make a note of it. Whether the wording may have any impact on deriving, certain types of answers. Was it 22% of people who confirmed who answered in the affirmative? Yeah. That to me, so maybe you can answer that's to me seemed very low. And then there was another question, and I'm not sure if it was a part of the question in the survey or part of the discussion of your paper about whether care work has decreased in importance over time. And if anything, like I was questioning the discussion of questions about decreasing, already assuming a decrease over time. The same question can be asked whether it has increased over time, or a more neutral way of asking would be, has there been any change in the importance of care work over time? And again, as Valeria being a care scholar over the past decade and a half, so more or less, I noticed the increasing interest and the spread of the field and new terminology around care economy, caring economy, care society, and so on. There's so much happening, and the disposition of that question about decreasing the importance did not seem to make sense to me.
Thanks, Ipe. And is it okay if you come in during the tea break? Is it to a different person? Not you can come with, if it's a different person, if it's the same discussant. You can come with the question and then they can come in with all the answers. You can just be quick. Yes, please. If it's a different person, yes, please.
So I have two questions. One is for Ozge. And I was looking at the regression, and it seems that the peak of care for children is 15 years old. And I was looking at the laws in Mongolia, and there's no laws on, no good legislation on child marriage. So I was wondering whether it's a sibling or is a kid. And for the topic, the hot topic of the feminist economists, I wanted to know what is exactly the definition of feminist economists, and if a person, if you are heterodox, automatically you are in that category, or if you can be a feminist economist because you decide to be, and you can be a feminist economist even though you are not saying that you're a feminist economist. Those are great.
Okay, let me allow then the panelists to respond. Can I give you 3 minutes each? Is that okay? And then you'll split it amongst the two panelists who are on the same thing. We'll just share the time. Okay, thank you. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you for your precious comments. And for the first comments, we will divide the direct and indirect, and we will see what will happen. Thank you for your comment. And the second question is, I also agree with you because this case is the care time. If the care time income increases, the care time increases, from our regression results. And because in our case, domestic work is not common. Very few, just a small part of population hire domestic workers to take care of their children. That's why if someone parents go for the work to work, and all the children has to take care of their siblings, younger siblings. So it's much more. It's our condition. And the third question was from the Ajit, and you said the herder was a dummy in our aggression. It was not significant, and I asked why. As Professor Ozge said, our country is very wet, and 30% of households, herder household, living in nowhere in the middle. So the herder children go to the smallest administration center, called Sum, and that's why the children live separate from their family, from the household, so they don't have to take care of the other siblings, or that's why maybe it is insignificant. Yes.
Thank you.
And actually, I couldn't listen to you through the second question.
It's about the employment profile. Okay, he'll discuss during.
It's okay. We can move on, and we can talk about it during tea.
And the fourth question was about the domestic working, and then female was significant around 31 minutes because the female it's a kind of social norm, because girls are more trying to learn than boys in our country, and most of the college students are female in our country. That's why the female education level is much higher than men. So this is reflects that trait.
Which one wants to come in? Just give it. Is there anyone online with questions?
Yeah, about Anna's question, Anna Marie's question about child marriage. We don't have law of the child marriage, and there's not early child marriage. Because of social norms, maybe in Mongolia, we don't have child marriage phenomenon in the country. So that's why it's not, doesn't make noise in this regression estimation, I think.
Should I continue? Oh, no, Ebru. Okay. Thank you so much for great points. I appreciate our discussants, all the issues that she raised. Just quickly, who's elder? Yeah, the survey defines it. I mean, the survey says that did you spend any care time with an elderly person who is over 65 plus? So survey defines that, so we use that definition. And there's the elderly roster that goes to Ajit also has it. We don't need to use innate kind of specification to identify who are getting elderly care, because they ask separately for it. Who did you provide that care? Is aunt, grandmother, grandfather, father, all those different for each. You can specify who is providing to whom. It's not like not like the age study, by the way. You're not. They just try to identify from who whom you were with. From that one, they try to identify who are getting elderly care.
Maybe that is not my question. The question was, can you identify dependents, people who needed attention, like based on their physical or mental limitations?
Yes, but from time you study, because you are spending, because the definition of the activity is elderly care, no? And then you are giving that, you are doing that activity for someone who is already specified there. If they're in the same household, you can also get an information about, you know, how much they are in need. But if it is outside household, they don't have many questions about, you know, detail. But within the same household, you can identify using different kind of variables, the extension of, you know, the extent of the elderly care that is spent. But I will explain, I will show you the four questionnaire form. Gunnar and many of you also our discussant also mentioned about social security. That's the point actually. Intra-household transfers of care will give an idea about, you know, how much to spend. And social security in Turkey pulling risks. I'll just give you a percentage. Women who are who get retired because of their own income, it's just 14%. And you can understand from also labor force participation gap, especially for sandwich generation. That's why we didn't, you know, use men. And one of the ideas what we wanted to figure out is women share unpaid elderly care work with other women. It's like pooling of resources of time, right, that they have. So that's why we try to focus on if which women are actually sharing with the other women. Do they have pension income or not? If they're living in the same household, we can figure out there's a pension income. But it's just you cannot identify whose pension income is that. Is just if there are more than 2 elderly in the household, and then there are a lot of issues about that. But social security coverage is quite good, especially for health system in Turkey. It's just, you know, women, when you have very low access to paid work, it is very linked to paid work, right? There are some schemes about cash scheme paying for elderly caretakers who are housewives, but they're not, you know, as widespread as possible. You are right, the institutional care cannot be taught as the, you know, that elderly care is absent, but that's why that's an advantage actually to understand care needs, elderly care needs, looking at time use study. You know, that's the actual people who are getting elderly care support. Sorry. And the informal definition, Valeria, thank you. We also have a question, and we discuss about that, you know, giving citations to the literature, but inter-household is much proper way to define. Yeah, I will, and probably I missed some of your questions here, but I will, you know, we will discuss. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We've got one more. Can I just get the online question in case it's one of the other panels? You just want to.
Right, question. What type of elderly care did you include? Care, emotional care as well, also different according or about?
I mean, the activity is not as disaggregated as, you know, psychological or health, you know, improving care. But we know from the qualitative studies, many have been done. It's just you need to be like a doctor, you need to have a knowledge about pills and all the medicine at the same time in some cases, you know. But we cannot figure out specifically in that episode that person was, you know, providing physical or psychological support. It's just in the time you study, whatever the disaggregation level allows, we use that one. But thanks for the question.
Thank you first, Mary, for the excellent comments. Yes. I'll start with the last question because that's so fresh in my mind, which is basically a clarification. We didn't have any questions on the survey specifying care work or any other feature of feminist economics. It was an open-ended question that asks, what are the distinguishing features of your research that make it feminist? And this only went to people who either checked feminist economics as one of their approaches to their economics research, or especially to scholars outside the discipline who are not trained as economists. The question was, do you identify your research as feminist? So this is a question also that went to those scholars outside the discipline. So nowhere we identified what makes it feminist, the research. These were just the answers we got from people, and we coded them and aggregated them under care work. Does that make sense? About declining significance of care work, that's a comment that I probably won't be able to do justice in such a short time by Bina Agarwal at the 2022 roundtable discussing care work. So she was arguing specifically within the Indian context how women's labor force participation increased, so on and so forth. Care work needs are not as high as it used to be. And she was cautioning feminist economists about overextending the care work framework to feminist economic analysis. So that's not where I stand. Those are not my words. I think it was in Mary's presentation. So hopefully that would please clarify. To answer Sarah's question, there are specifically 18 respondents who published in more than one venue. Because it's such a small number, it's not ethical to discuss about what distinguishes them, because you can basically look at the journals and identify, and there's an ethical responsibility not to reveal who people are, what they said, so we basically do not discuss that in the paper. But thank you so much, I think that's a great question. For Valeria, in terms of whether being a care work scholar makes you a good feminist economist, that's nowhere in the paper. You might think that, but we tried very, very hard to let people speak for themselves. And in a way, we were asking, do you consider your research feminist? Tell us why. What is it that makes it feminist? And we reported all the results, not in this paper. There's another paper that's looking at everything people said about what makes it feminist. And we tried very, very hard not to bring a normative judgment about which one we think is more feminist than the other. Does that make sense? We were just interested in what people had to say. In that paper, we do talk about we have a survey question, again, not from our perspective, but from what respondents told us. What do you think is the difference between gender economics and feminist economics? Again, we were interested in what they had to say rather than us defining, you're a feminist economist, you're not a feminist economist. Does that make sense? So I don't know if that answers your question. If not, we can talk more later. I think, did I answer all the other questions? Thank you.
We're technically only 10 minutes behind time because we started late, but I think we'll have to eat into our tea break now, so that we're back, all of us, by 4, so we don't leave late in the evening. So I think I'm going to release everyone and thank the panelists. If we can give them all a round of applause. I mean, hopefully every one of us will be back at 4 for the last session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.